Hello there, welcome to this presentation on the Asian hornet. My name is Sam Day, I'm a beekeeper in Kent and I'm also quite interested in this hornet, and I will talk to you about some of the reasons why and hopefully what we can do together to stop it from becoming established here in the UK. Just please bear with me slightly with the technology because it doesn't come naturally. Okay, share screen, let's go. So here is a beautiful image of the lovely Asian hornet. It's actually quite a guilty secret of mine that I quite like this hornet. I think it's incredible, really. It's beautiful. It's really adaptable to new environments. It's done exceptionally well in how quickly it's become established in continental Europe. It's not yet established or considered established in the UK. We'll talk a bit more about how many times it's been seen and where you're likely to see it in the future. Okay, so what is it not, first of all? The top picture you can see here is the European hornet, Vespa crabro. That's already, it's native to the UK and much of Europe. It's actually slightly larger than the Asian hornet that's coming over now. And I think it looks like a big wasp, basically. It's predominantly yellow. It's got the lovely yellow and black markings on the abdomen. And it's also sort of reddish brown as opposed to black, which the Asian hornet is, as you'll see in a minute. Other species that you might confuse the Asian hornet for is the bottom right picture showing a hoverfly. They're much more common later on in the year, around September time. And they are actually designed to look like a hornet. So they don't have a sting themselves, but so they're just trying to copy another insect that's obviously more scary than they are. And then, of course, you've seen wasps. Every picnic ever, every barbecue ever. But they're smaller than the Asian hornet and not really much to worry about. So this is the Asian hornet. She's quite lovely. She's predominantly very, very dark, so it's either sort of dark brown or black, depending on the individual. She's only got one band of solid yellow on her abdomen, and as you can see, she's got sort of yellow tips to her legs. You could be saying she's wearing sort of yellow socks. But yeah, she's quite lovely. So, if you wanted to have a look at any more images of the Asian hornet in comparison to other similar looking species, I would fully recommend you download the Asian Hornet Watch app. It's free and it's available on Apple and Android. And each of these sections, so this is just a screenshot I've taken, you can click on each of these species and you can see loads more images, loads of facts about them. So it might be quite useful if you see something in the garden and you're not quite sure what it is, you might be able to find it in this app. And also, if you ever do see a hornet, you can report it through here, and that would be really, really invaluable. You could do that in the pictures, that'd be great. So, why are we worried about the Asian hornet? It's a predator of pollinators, so sometimes in the media it gets reported as being a sort of honeybee specialist. But in truth, it will eat absolutely everything from the sort of lovely, fluffy bumble to things that we don't care so much about, like the wasps. However, everything's part of the ecosystem. They're all important for different reasons. So it's definitely something that we need to be concerned about, is how many of these things that they will eat, native insects. They're defensive near the nest, so they're not aggressive. It's only if they're disturbed that it is potentially a problem for humans, particularly when you consider some of the places that they build their nests, and I will talk about that in a bit. And they're also spreading incredibly rapidly. So the first hornet, and it was a single hibernating hornet that was actually imported into France probably around 2003. And since then, they have just exploded at a colossal rate. So they cover about 78, 80 odd kilometres a year in terms of their expansion. And there's been one or two jumps where they've increased by 100 or 200 kilometres across Europe. So we've had Asian hornets seen in the UK since about 2016. They're not yet considered established here, but we will definitely be seeing much more of them in the very near future. So this was 2016. This is a map with all the green pins showing where there have been hornet sightings reported in the UK. You can see the one right at the bottom was actually in Guernsey. So they've caused much more of a nuisance in the Channel Islands over the last couple of years, possibly because they're just that much closer to France or slightly lower down. So as the hornets are coming up through France and across Europe, we're just more likely to see more of them. So 2017, only 2 sightings in the mainland UK. 2018, many more hornets. And 2019, last year, not so many again, which is quite interesting because that kind of bucks the trend where this insect is concerned. So the graph that I'm showing you now on the right is the numbers for Jersey. So this is how many hornets, whether they were individual queens identified early in the spring, or the primary nests, which are slightly later from sort of March through to early July, or secondary nests, which are the big ones. So in 2016 they were noted, but no official records were kept. In 2017 they had, I think it was 17, total of 17 queens, primary nests and secondary nests. 2018 it was 55, and last year it was 153, something like that. So it's just, you know, they're just so able to adapt to these new environments that they find themselves in. So they really are quite incredible. But that's probably why we should be worried. So where are you likely to see hornets? Well, obviously, as with anything, it depends on the time of the year. So let's go through by season. So in spring, so what we have is a single hornet. So as in the first hornet that came to Europe, a single hibernating hornet queen was brought over, possibly in pottery. We're not quite sure. She will emerge from hibernation and she will look for suitable food to sort of build up her strength. This is probably around March or April. So first of all, she's just looking for nectar. These hornets are particularly fond of camellias. So if you've got a winter flowering camellia, that's somewhere that you're quite likely to see them. Once she's eaten enough and sort of built up her reserves, she will start to build a primary nest. And these can be absolutely tiny. So you see the picture on the top right with a 20p coin there, just as a comparison. So basically about the size of a golf ball or so. And she builds this fantastic creation from wood pulp that she chews and she mixes with saliva. It's kind of like paper mache or something. And she will lay 1 egg a day in the beginning. So it's a very slow build up in the beginning. She cares for the larva all by herself, so she goes out foraging. She's looking for protein for the grubs. So that's where the insects come in under threat. And she tries to keep them warm at night, so she keeps expanding this nest, rebuilding it, getting it slightly larger each time. Eventually accommodates more cells, and then she lays more eggs. So this is usually in a man-made structure, so we're talking sort of 1 to 2 meters from the ground. Hornets, Asian hornets seem to be particularly fond of living near people, or maybe that's just because, you know, we think they are because we find them when they're nesting in the garage or the shed. But these kind of places are ideal. You know, they're sheltered from the worst of the elements, so she kind of gets a head start in keeping the babies warm. So anywhere that's outbuildings, you know, sheds and garages, porches, attics if they can get in, anywhere that they have that bit of protection is perfect. And the nest will usually expand to about the size of a football when it's in this low down, relatively low position. So they go from really tiny to quite some size before they think to relocate. So some images here to illustrate what they need. So obviously the bark from trees or, you know, fence posts or anything like that in order to make the actual structure of the nest. They also need a lot of water to sort of mash up with this wood pulp. So ponds, bird baths, streams, paddling pools, even puddles, anything like that. You might see hornets just taking water and then flying into it. And then the bottom left picture shows a bird box, because guess what? That's a lovely sheltered, sort of fairly low down spot where quite a few hornet nests have been found, particularly in Jersey, where they seem to be really keen on them. And they only get noticed when the nest actually expands outside the walls of the bird box, and they just incorporate the structure of the bird box within the nest. So in the summer then, when there's around 150 workers in the primary nest, they kind of get the need triggered to build a new home that's bigger and maybe further away from predators. So they typically tend to relocate to the top of a tree. Not always, but most of the time. So they can go sort of 50, 60 foot high into a nearby tree. The problem for the humans is obviously when somebody's, for example, in a hedge, and the hedge happens to hide a hornet nest, and the vibration or the noise, the machinery disturbs the hornets, and that's when they'll come out and say, "We don't want you here, this is our home." So that's something to be aware of, particularly if you're a king gardener. The larvae are fed during this time on protein, so anything in the insect world, basically, absolutely anything. They've been known to eat butterflies, dragonflies that are small enough, spiders, all sorts. I mean, they'll go for roadkill. They're not fussy. They're quite efficient scavengers, really. The nest can actually expand to include 10,000 workers, which is a crazy number when you consider how much protein each grub in that structure needs in order to develop into full-size hornets. And unfortunately for us, about 30%, this is based on data from Jersey, 30% of these primary nests fail to relocate. So maybe, for example, they're in a wall cavity and they've got enough space where they are in order to expand to the full size. They don't feel threatened where they are, so they don't see the need to move on. And that's obviously when it's just much more of a concern for people. So we've got some pictures here of places that we might see them later on in the summer. We've got blueberries, they're quite keen on grapes as well, I understand. Wild fennel, cotoneaster, and the picture in the middle is some seafood. So they like seafood as well. And that might be more of concern to us now that we're trying to live outside, socialise outside. So that might mean just more opportunity if restaurants start opening up tables outside. We're more likely to come across these things trying to eat leftovers on our plates, for example. Okay, into the autumn. If we have hornets present in an area and we haven't found the secondary nest that they're coming from towards the end of September, that's when we really start to get worried, because it's at the end of September when the males are starting to leave the nest and waiting, kind of hanging around the nest, looking for next year's queens, so the ones that will mate and then hibernate in order to start the whole cycle again the next year. So the queens will sort of emerge from the cell and they will spend 1 or 2 weeks sort of being fed and drying their wings and so on before they just leave the nest for good. Each nest can produce hundreds of queens. So I think it's a very conservative estimate. We expect a full-size nest that develops to maturity to produce about 250 queens for the following year. So obviously that's a massive number, but then you have to consider that maybe up to 99% of these queens will die off over the winter. They'll fail to find a suitable nesting site, or they won't eat enough to last them throughout hibernation, or they'll be uncovered by a badger maybe and eaten. I have no idea actually if badgers eat them, but I'll look into that. So basically, once the queens have left the nest, they will look for somewhere suitable to hibernate. Meanwhile, the nest that they came from has died off basically due to old age. So the original queen that founded that nest will die. The workers don't live that long, so they'll all die off eventually. The nest may even have some larvae that end up dying because there aren't enough workers to care for them, to feed them, and so on. So this is sort of in autumn where we'll see them, much like wasps. We will probably see them in pubs and beer gardens, on apple trees in particular, and pear trees. They like that decaying fruit kind of thing. that's when they also become a real problem for beekeepers very late on in the beekeeping year, when basically they will hang outside a bee colony and they will pick off a returning bee that's heavy and a bit slow with carrying pollen and nectar, and they're excellent flyers and they're really well suited to catching these insects in midair, and then they will unfortunately rip off the head, the wings, the legs, all the body bits they don't want. They actually only want that ball of protein, the thorax, where the flight muscles are, because it's just a solid lump of meat, and they will just chew it up and feed it to the larvae back in the nest. So there is a lovely picture of a secondary nest that was well concealed in a tree, and an amazing tracking team in Jersey have followed the hornet. Can you see the one almost right in the middle with the green spot on its back? That hornet has been feeding at a bait station and then going off in a certain direction, and the team have managed to eventually track it into this tree. And you can see the entrance there. So get a pointer. Oh. Not what I missed. But the big sort of hole that's about halfway down on the leftish side is the entrance, and that's actually quite a key difference between an Asian hornet nest and a European hornet nest, is that the Asian hornets will have the entrance kind of on the side, whereas European hornet nests tend to prefer to nest in a cavity. So they will build a similar looking nest, but it will be inside a tree trunk, for example, and I think the entrance tends to be right at the bottom as well. Okay. Move on. So winter. The nest has basically died off. So you might actually notice the picture at the bottom left. You might notice something like that when you're out walking in the winter time. So it's always worth looking into the trees when the leaves drop, just to see if you can see anything that looks basically like a big basketball or something stuck in a tree. That could be a nest. And the reason that it's really valuable to report even an empty nest is because most of the queens that emerge from that nest will stay somewhere in that area. So if we know where last year's nests were, that gives us a head start on looking for hornets the following year. So actually the nest may be attacked later on in the year by birds that are looking for the last of those larvae that have died, or there aren't enough hornets to defend the nest. So it might get picked up by birds, but it's too late really to make a difference to how well the hornets are going to do. Okay, so some images of where we might find the hibernating queens. So top right, you've got tree bark. So they might hibernate individually or in kind of small groups of 2 or 3 hornets. They can get under something that just protects them from the worst of the elements. They might be kind of in loose soil. They might be, as in the first hornet that came, that was shipped into France, maybe in a stack of flower pots, something like that. So loads of places where they can be found. Right, how about a bit of fun? Should we go tracking and look for our very first hornet nest together? Yes, I think we should. Okay, so very quickly we need a yellow bucket, because maybe hornets are attracted slightly to the colour yellow. That hasn't been proven. So a bucket just to raise up the bait station, and that's just to make the insect feel more comfortable eating, just slightly off the ground. We put the wasp bait in a dish. We weight it down with, in paper. The paper soaks up the scent and sort of stops it from evaporating too quickly. Weight that down with a rock. We need a compass, a timer. We don't strictly need walkie-talkies, but they're fun to play with. We use our beekeeping skills, so we have a sort of plastic device in which you can catch the queen and just put some paint on her, just so that you can see her more easily. So we use that same device to mark hornets with. You need ideally sort of a map as well, or a mobile phone will do. Binoculars are useful for when you think you've seen the nest in the tree, and you need also a lot of patience. So the Jersey method. The picture on the left, we are trying to attract hornets. So that was a test that was done, I think, in 2017, to see if the hornets preferred wasp bait or the other sticky thing there is honey. That's our bait station in the middle. So we've gone with the wasp baits. That's the pink stuff in the paper. The hornets are loving it, and that's the queen marking device there. So hornet individual has been caught and is being painted yellow. This picture on the left just shows another method of marking hornets. That's with tiny numbered discs. So it's quite a lot of effort. Okay, so once you've got a marked hornet, you simply wait for her to leave your bait station. You start your timer, and then you stop the timer when she returns. So that's why we've marked them a certain colour or maybe even a number, is so that we know it's the same hornet that's come back. A very, very rough rule says that the nest, if the hornet, is gone for 4 minutes, roughly the nest will be 400 metres in that same direction that the hornet's gone off in. Doesn't always follow, but it's just, a good example when you're out in the field. So here we are enjoying our favourite new hobby. We've got some nice camping chairs, we're sitting around watching the yellow bucket. I think the two people standing up are trying to follow the flying hornet as far as they possibly can, while the man in the yellow jumper is keeping an eye on the time. And then the picture on the right is somebody actually pointing at the nest that they found in that tree. No, I can't see it either. So let's say that we are within a minute of the hornet going and coming back to the bait station. That means we are really, really close to the nest. We're probably really, much nearer than 100 metres away when you consider the amount of time the hornet spends on the nest once she's returned with whatever it is she's been foraging for. So you might find it useful, for example, if you've got a tree, to study the sky around the tree and look for hornets or big insects coming and going. That might give you an indication of where the nest is. If you think it's a particular tree, you can always stand at the base, the trunk of the tree, with your back to it and look up through the branches and see if you can kind of follow any of the big branches and see a nest coming down. So there we are, we've tracked our first nest. It's in that tree. What do you mean you can't see it? Okay, let's go a bit closer. There it is. Somewhere in. Okay, let's go a bit closer. Okay, how about now? Can you see it yet? Okay, I've just spotted it. Okay, this nest is sort of right in the middle of your picture, really, maybe slightly further down in the middle, but it's exceptionally well camouflaged. So let's go a bit closer. Does that help? I think it's almost flat bang middle of your picture now, the nest. Definitely middle. Can you see it now? It's kind of behind some leaves, so you might be able to just make out kind of slightly more tan than the bark of the tree. And there you go, you've got the nest, obviously some leaves in front, but they're now out of focus because the camera is focused on the nest behind. Did you find that easy? It's not an easy game, but I think that's why it's fun. So there it is. You can see the beautiful, almost the stripes that they make when they craft these nests out of different colours of bark, and yeah, they're quite fantastic creations, really. So okay, let's track another one because that one was really hard. This one is also in Jersey, and it's a couple of 100 metres down from a really nice coastal path. And I think it was the bee inspectors that went out to Jersey for training that managed to track it nearly all of the way there. So I'll just leave this page up for a minute and just see if anybody can spot it here. There's a lot of brown ferns. It's not actually amongst the ferns at all. It is actually very near the sea. And once you see it, you'll kick yourself because it's quite obvious. So there it is in a tiny rock overhang. They've built a fantastic, quite a large secondary nest. I'll go back so you can see it now. Just up from the sea, tucked under that bit of rock. And in this picture, you can actually see the hornets on the surface, on the outer shell of the nest. So, what can we do about these hornets? I think you know why they're a problem now, but what actions can you take as an individual to sort of hopefully stop these things from becoming established? Okay, the single most important thing is education. We've got a real problem with the Asian hornet, the Asian giant hornet, which is the one that's been found, also known as the murder hornet, which is in the USA and Canada. We've got this picture here that it took me about 2 minutes to find this, taken from the Mirror, and it's showing a picture of an Asian hornet, which is actually Vespa crabro, the native hornet in the UK, the European hornet, yeah. So it's the wrong picture for the story, basically. Educate. No nests will be found if nobody's looking. Most, I think, nearly all of reports of the hornets that have been found in the UK have come from members of the public. Maybe they've seen a poster in a garden centre or somewhere, and then they notice one in their garden. We really need as many people who can identify these as possible to know how to report them when they see them. And then also it's about educating beekeepers and other people tracking. So how is the best way to find these nests? There'll be loads of things that will be, technology that will be helpful in looking for them. So in terms of the damage that these things are going to cause, we can't actually put a figure on it because, well, for example, we know that the value of pollination to the UK is worth £690 million a year or so. So we know, obviously, these hornets will predate on our native pollinators and reduce the available pollinators for those crops. But it's not just about the actual lack of or reduction in pollinators. For example, in Spain, I know there are pickers who are refusing to work on vineyards because the chance of taking handfuls of grapes and actually taking an Asian hornet in your hand is quite high. So in some places they've stopped doing that work. We've got all the damage that will be done to ripe apples and pears that aren't taken off the trees quickly enough that will be eaten by these things. 80% of crops in Europe require pollination. So it's a serious threat to UK and to European production. And then of course there's the ecological costs. So we've got 26 species of bumblebee here in the UK, and a lot of those are already quite scarce. Honeybees have, for the most part, sort of slightly crazy beekeepers attached to them. So it's not the honeybee that I'm concerned with. It's all of these rarer species that don't have a person standing outside the door of the nest saying, "Look, the bees are being eaten," or wasps, or the whatever they are, the dragonflies, the butterflies are being eaten by this insect. We've got to do something. We don't know fully what we've got in what in significant quantities. So it's a really difficult one to gauge how badly effective they're going to be. And I think the single biggest thing we need to educate ourselves on is this is more than a beekeeper's problem. These hornets are very much described as being a honeybee predator. And if you think about it, a bee colony is like a supermarket. Once they find it, they can just wait outside and pick up as much as they want. But they will eat everything else. So it's not just beekeepers that need to be concerned about this. It is everyone, from gardeners who might chop down something that is hiding a hornet nest, people who enjoy being outside, drinking in the sun, or having a picnic or a barbecue, or whatever it is. Hornets are going to be a pest in these sort of environments as well. So you can possibly learn how to identify these hornets, and the key features are yellow legs. They're mostly dark, so dark brown or black, pretty much all over, and they've only got one solid yellow segment on the abdomen, and those are really key features. If you can keep watch, that would be great. So in the spring time, if you just check in your garage, look in your shed, look at the roof, see if anything's hanging down. Might only be tiny, but just keep an eye out for things like that. And then again, if you've got a fruit tree or you're out on a walk and you see a puddle and there's a hornet drinking from it, anything like that, if you can take a picture and report it on the app, that would be invaluable to the cause. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope you've learned something. And if not, oh dear, I need to improve my presentations. Thank you very much for watching.